My name is Ethan Hayes, and for 22 years my world was built on paper and promises. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, where the sun bakes the ambition right into the stucco of every new housing development. At 52, I was a seasoned mortgage broker, a veteran of booms and busts, a man who could navigate the labyrinth of finance to put a set of house keys into a young family's hand. That was my world, and I was proud of it. I wasn't just selling loans, I was selling the American dream, one three-bedroom, two-bath slice at a time. I was good at it because I believed in it. I believed in honesty, in the handshake, in looking a person in the eye and telling them the truth, even if it was a hard truth. I worked for a boutique firm, Sterling Mortgage, right in the heart of the city. I was the first employee the owner, Victoria Sterling, ever hired. I'd helped her build the company from a tiny office with a leaky air conditioner into one of the most respected brokerages in the valley. Victoria was the kind of woman who seemed to be forged from steel and perfume. She was always impeccably dressed in sharp, expensive suits, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. Her smile was a work of art, but it never, ever reached her cold, calculating eyes. In the beginning, we were a team. She was the ambition, and I was the integrity. Together, we made people's dreams come true and made a good living doing it. But over the years, something changed. The market shifts, the pressure, it did something to her. Or maybe it just revealed who she had been all along. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Friday. It was payday. I had just closed the biggest and most complex deal of my career, a multi-property portfolio for a developer. It was a monster of a file, one that had taken me 3 months of late nights and endless phone calls to wrestle into submission. The commission on that deal alone was supposed to be enough for my wife, Sarah, and me to finally replace our ancient, groaning air conditioning unit and maybe even take that trip to the coast we'd been putting off for years. I opened my pay envelope, my heart thumping with anticipation. I unfolded the stub, and the numbers swam before my eyes. They were wrong. They were horrifyingly wrong. It was thousands of dollars short. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a mutilation of what I had earned. I thought it had to be a clerical error. I walked down the hall, the pay stub trembling slightly in my hand. Victoria's office door was open. She was on the phone, laughing at something, a sound like ice cubes clinking in a glass. I waited until she was done. I stepped in and closed the door gently behind me. I laid the pay stub on her polished mahogany desk. "Victoria," I said, my voice steady, "I think there's been a mistake with my check." She didn't even look at it. She swiveled in her leather chair and gave me that high-gloss smile. "No mistake, Ethan. We're restructuring the commission rates. A memo went out." I stared at her. "A memo? I never saw a memo." "It must have gotten lost in your inbox," she said, her tone breezy, dismissive. "It's a necessary adjustment. Market conditions, overhead, you understand." I didn't understand. I understood that she had waited until after I closed the biggest deal of my life to retroactively slash my pay. She had used my hard work and then changed the rules at the finish line. It was theft, plain and simple, dressed up in corporate language. I felt a hot surge of anger, but I swallowed it down. I was a professional. I had a reputation. "Victoria," I said, choosing my words carefully. "This isn't right. We had an agreement." Her smile vanished. The mask was off. "The agreement, Ethan, is that you work for me, and I am telling you what the new structure is. If you have a problem with it, the door is right there." My world, which had felt so solid just an hour before, now had a hairline fracture running right through it, but the earthquake was yet to come. A few weeks later, Sarah went to the pharmacy to pick up her prescription for her blood pressure medication, something she'd taken for years. She called me from the car, her voice tight with confusion and panic. "Ethan, they said our insurance was declined. They wanted to charge me over $400. What's going on?" My blood ran cold. I immediately pulled up my last pay stub on my computer. I scrolled down to the deductions section. Health insurance premium, $0. Life insurance premium, $0. The deductions were gone. They had been there the month before, but now they were gone. She hadn't sent a memo about that. She hadn't said a word. She had just stopped. She had canceled our health insurance, the safety net for my family, without so much as a courtesy email. I imagined Sarah at that pharmacy counter, embarrassed and scared. I imagined what would happen if one of us had a real medical emergency. The thought was terrifying. That evening, I sat in my home office, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The dream I had been selling for 2 decades felt like a lie. The woman I had helped build an empire was systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, for a few extra dollars on her balance sheet. And that's when I understood the true problem. It wasn't just about my money or my insurance. It was about her. It was about the rot at the core of Sterling Mortgage. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Victoria Sterling had become my nemesis, and I was trapped in the crumbling house I had helped her build. My first instinct was to fight back directly. I was Ethan Hayes. I had seniority, I had respect, or so I thought. I tried to rally the other brokers. I called a quiet meeting after hours at a nearby coffee shop with two of my colleagues. There was Mark, a young guy in his late 20s with a new baby at home and a mortgage that kept him awake at night. And there was Brenda, a cynical veteran who had seen it all and trusted no one, least of all Victoria. I laid it all out for them, the commission / the cancelled insurance. Mark's face went pale. He pulled out his own pay stub and his hands shook as he saw the same $0 deduction. Brenda just stirred her coffee, a grim, knowing look on her face. "She's a shark, Ethan," Brenda said, her voice low, "and there's blood in the water. She's squeezing every last drop out of this company before she runs it into the ground." "So we have to do something," I urged. "If we all go to her together as a group, she can't fire all of us. We can demand she reinstate the insurance. We can negotiate the commissions." Mark looked terrified. "I can't," he whispered. "I'll lose my job. I have a family, Ethan. I can't risk it." Brenda shook her head. "It's no use. She'll just pick us off one by one. She'll find a reason to fire you for poor performance next week and Mark the week after. She has all the power." The meeting was a failure. I left feeling more isolated than ever. They were too scared, too beaten down. I was on my own. My failure to unite my colleagues only seemed to embolden Victoria. The atmosphere in the office turned toxic. She would walk the floor like a predator, her eyes scanning for any sign of dissent. But my frustration also sharpened my senses. I started noticing things I had previously ignored, small inconsistencies that now seemed like giant red flags. There were certain clients, for example, who always dealt directly with Victoria. Their files were kept under lock and key in her office, not in the main filing system. I started seeing them come and go, men in expensive cars who looked less like businessmen and more like thugs. They never brought briefcases. They brought thick envelopes. One afternoon, I was walking past her office and her door was slightly ajar. I heard her on the phone, her voice a low purr. "Just make sure the income statement reflects a robust catering business," she said. "The lender won't look too closely, and the $60,000 in cash will be considered a consulting fee. It greases the wheels." I froze, falsifying income statements, accepting huge cash payments under the table. This was serious, federal-level crime. This was beyond squeezing commissions. This was a deliberate, calculated conspiracy to defraud lenders. A new plan began to form in my mind, a dangerous one. I started my own secret investigation. Late at night, when the cleaning crew was the only other sound in the building, I would go through the trash from Victoria's office. I'd find discarded drafts of documents, notes with names and numbers. During the day, when she was out at a long lunch, I managed to find the spare key to her filing cabinet. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid it into the lock. Inside, I found a different world. There were two sets of books for some deals. One was the official file, the one the lenders saw. The other, tucked in a separate folder, contained the real numbers along with notes on cash payments. I started making copies. I used the office scanner late at night, emailing the documents to a new anonymous email address I had created. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, a testament to her greed. Property addresses, borrower names, falsified tax returns, notes on cash pickups. I was building a case brick by painstaking brick, but I was getting reckless, and Victoria was no fool. She must have sensed something. One Monday morning, she called me into her office. On her desk was a new loan file. "Ethan," she said, her smile like a razor blade, "I have a special project for you. This client is very important. He needs this loan to close by the end of the week. No exceptions." I opened the file. It was a mess. The applicant's income was listed as coming from a vague import-export business, with bank statements that looked like they were printed in a basement. The debt-to-income ratio was impossibly high. It was the kind of loan that screamed fraud. It was a test. I knew it. She was testing my loyalty or perhaps my complicity. If I pushed this garbage through, I would be implicated in her crimes. If I refused, she would have a reason to get rid of me. "Victoria, I can't in good conscience approve this," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "The documentation is weak. The risk is too high. No reputable lender will touch this." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Your job isn't to be a conscience, Ethan. Your job is to close deals. I am telling you to make this happen. And I'm telling you that it's illegal and I won't do it," I said, standing my ground. That was the moment everything shattered. The next day, she called an all-hands meeting. She stood before the entire staff, the picture of calm authority. And then she tore me to shreds. She didn't fire me. That would have been too kind. Instead, she publicly humiliated me. She accused me of being a negative influence, of failing to be a team player, of costing the company a valuable client. She announced that I was being put on probation, my performance to be reviewed weekly. My colleagues, the same people I had tried to help, stared at their shoes. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. Brenda looked at me with a mixture of pity and "I told you so." I was an outcast in my own office, a pariah in the world I had built. I would sit at my desk and the phone wouldn't ring. My pipeline of clients, which had been full for 2 decades, dried up. She was starving me out. I would come home at night, defeated and hollowed out. Sarah would look at me with such worry in her eyes, and I felt like a complete failure. I had tried to solve the problem, to fight back, but I had only made it worse. I had lost my income, my professional standing, and my dignity. Victoria had me pinned. It felt like checkmate. All my evidence, all those secret copies, felt useless. What could I do? If I went to the authorities now, it would look like sour grapes, a disgruntled employee on probation lashing out. She had outmaneuvered me completely. I was at the lowest point of my life, certain that all was lost. The feeling of utter defeat lingered for a week. I'd go to work, sit in the suffocating silence of my probation, and come home feeling like a ghost. Victoria would occasionally walk by my desk with a smirk, a silent one that was more infuriating than any words she could have said. It was during one of those long, empty evenings at home, staring at the ceiling, that something inside me shifted. It wasn't a sudden burst of courage, but a slow, cold hardening of my resolve. I had hit rock bottom. And the strange thing about rock bottom is that there's nowhere to go but up. Or in my case, there was nowhere to go but forward with the only plan I had left. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She was wrong. She had only made me more determined. My final attempt wouldn't be a confrontation. It wouldn't be a shouting match in her office. It would be silent, precise, and devastating. I turned my home office into a war room. The anger was gone, replaced by a laser-like focus. For 2 weeks, every night after Sarah went to bed, I worked. The glow of the monitor was my only companion. I took the mountain of evidence I had copied, the falsified income statements, the 2 sets of books, the notes on cash payments, the property addresses of fraudulent loans, and I began to assemble my weapon. I didn't just dump the files. I wrote a detailed narrative report. I created a timeline of Victoria's criminal activity. I cross-referenced names, dates, and dollar amounts. I explained the schemes in simple, clear language, showing how she defrauded lenders and laundered money through her business. I created a spreadsheet that connected every shady client to a property and a cash payment. I was no longer just a mortgage broker. I was a forensic accountant fueled by righteous fury. I poured 22 years of industry knowledge into making my report so clear, so undeniable, that no investigator could possibly ignore it. When I was done, I had a 30-page document supported by over 200 pages of exhibits. It was a masterpiece of condemnation. The day I decided to quit was one of the sunniest days I'd ever seen in Phoenix. It felt fitting. I walked into Sterling Mortgage for the last time. I didn't carry a box for my things. I would come back for that later. I just carried my letter of resignation. I knocked on Victoria's door. "Come in," she called. I walked in and stood before her desk. She leaned back in her chair, a look of smug expectation on her face. She probably thought I was there to beg for my job back, to finally bend the knee. "Victoria," I said, my voice perfectly calm, "I'm here to give you my 2 weeks' notice." The smirk on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "What did you say?" "I'm resigning," I repeated, placing the letter on her desk. "I've decided to make a career change. I'm looking to get into the tech industry. It's time for something new." She stared at me, trying to process it. People didn't just walk away from her. They were fired, or they clung on in fear. My calm, voluntary departure was something outside of her understanding of power. It was the first time I had seen her completely off balance, and it was a small, sweet taste of victory. "Well," she finally said, recovering slightly, "I suppose that's for the best. You haven't been a good fit here for some time." "I wish you all the best," I said, turning to leave. It was the most honest lie I'd ever told. I did wish her the best, the absolute best that federal and state law had to offer. That weekend, I printed 2 identical copies of my entire dossier. I put them into 2 large, heavy manila envelopes. On Monday morning, I drove to a post office far from my house. I addressed one envelope to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. I addressed the other to the Enforcement and Compliance Division of the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, the very board that issued Victoria her precious brokerage license. I paid for certified mail with return receipt requested. The postal clerk stamped the envelopes with a heavy, satisfying thud. As I dropped them into the mail slot, I didn't feel elation or glee. I just felt a profound sense of release, as if I had been carrying a massive weight for years and had finally set it down. The next few months were a strange mix of terror and liberation. I enrolled in some online courses for project management and data analysis. At 52, learning a new field was humbling and difficult, but it was also exhilarating. I was building something new, something that was entirely mine. Sarah was my rock, encouraging me every step of the way. We were living on savings, and it was tight, but the stress that had filled our home was gone. I was present. I was sleeping through the night for the first time in a year. I never heard anything back directly from the agencies, and I didn't expect to. I just focused on my new life. About 4 months after I mailed those packages, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered it. "Ethan, it's Mark." His voice was hushed, almost breathless. "Mark, how are you? What's going on?" "You're not going to believe it," he said. "They came this morning, federal agents, 3 of them in dark suits. They walked right into Victoria's office with a warrant. They went through everything. They packed up her computer, boxes of files. They questioned everyone." I held my breath, my heart starting to pound. "And Victoria? They escorted her out, Ethan, in front of everyone. She didn't even have her purse. She looked small. The state board called an hour ago. They've summarily suspended her license pending the investigation. Sterling Mortgage is done. The doors are locked. We're all out of a job, but my God, Ethan, it was like watching a movie." A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't about the company being shut down or people losing their jobs. It was about justice. The poetic justice was almost biblical. Her greed had built an empire of paper, and a different kind of paper had brought it all crashing down. My new normal is better than I could have imagined. I landed a job as a project coordinator for a software company. The work is challenging, and I'm the oldest guy on my team by a decade, but I'm respected for my experience and my calm demeanor. I leave work at 5 o'clock every day. My blood pressure is down. Sarah and I finally took that trip to the coast. We walked along the beach, and for the first time, I felt the sun on my face without a shadow of anxiety looming over me. I was fulfilled in a way I never was. Selling loans. I had taken a risk, stood up for what was right, and rebuilt my life on a foundation of integrity. And then, about a year after the raid, the final, unexpected twist happened. I was at a large home improvement store on a Saturday morning, picking out paint colors with Sarah. As we were walking down an aisle, I saw a woman in a faded orange apron, stocking shelves with cans of spackle. She looked tired, worn down. Her hair wasn't perfectly coiffed. It was messy and had dark roots showing. As she turned, her eyes met mine. It was Victoria. All the steel was gone from her posture. She looked right at me, and for a split second I saw a flash of recognition, followed by a dawning, horrifying understanding. Her face went slack. In that silent, fleeting moment, she knew. She knew it was me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gave her a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Then I took Sarah's hand, and we continued on our way, leaving her there in the dust and the ruins of her own making.